Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you Limitless Leaders. And if you're watching the replay, thank you so much for scrolling by and stopping. My name is Simmone L, Bowe, the Limitless Life Coach, Leadership Strategist. I am so excited to be a part of this show where we talk all things leadership development. And we are starting a new series this week, transforming culture. How limitless leaders transform culture, workplace culture, and even national culture. We're not limited, right? And so this for me is very important because culture plays such a huge part in setting the tone for an organization and how an organization approaches work, how people feel in the organization. Anyway, we're going to get into all of that good stuff. I will say good morning, good morning, good morning to all of you. Good morning to our LinkedIn audience. Dr. Omega, good to see you. OJ, it's been too long. What's going on? Donne, good morning to you and all of you who are tuning in on Facebook and YouTube. Good morning to all of you as well. So let's talk about culture. And I want to start with this quote: leaders set the tone that the organization sings to. Leaders set the tone that the organization sings to. And people may think, well, I'm not that powerful. I am not that, influential. But really, you are. And I have seen examples of leaders who, just by the way they work, by the way they communicate, they set the pace, they change the entire tone of how everybody else works. So when you think about the bosses that you've had in your career, in your lifetime. Think about leaders of nations and how the tone moves for the nation. So it's whatever that leader believes. And this is why I always teach first and foremost with teaching leadership. It has to start with the belief system. What you believe is what is going to flow from you. Good morning, Dr. Sala. So what you believe is going to flow from you. And so if you believe, for instance, that work should not be a fun place, like you shouldn't hear people at their workstations talking and laughing and socializing, work is about work, then you will set the tone for the organization where it's going to be this terrified hush. And I'm sure you have been in offices with that type of environment where people are speaking in these hushed tones and whispers, and it seems very tight and formal and fearful. That comes from a leadership mindset. Or you may have just the complete opposite, where it's open, it's friendly, there's laughing, there's talking, there's socializing, people are collaborating, creating. That also comes from leadership. And it also comes from vision. And we're going to talk about some of the things that impact culture in this series. So the leaders set the tone. That leader's work ethic will flow through the organization. Their style of leadership, how they see the world, how they see people, will flow through the organization. And so why is this important as organizational leaders? This is important because you want the tone of the organization, your workplace culture, to reflect your vision and not personalities. So you have to be very intentional about the culture that you want to create. It should not be centered around leadership celebrities in your organization. And then everybody's dancing to the beat of that person's drum. Because the danger of that is that the organization, every time you have leadership changes, the organization is going to change. And so that becomes very disruptive to the morale, to the workflow, to even productivity, because everybody's trying to figure out, how do I please these leaders? So let's look at some pillars of organizational culture. And I mentioned first and foremost the vision, and I don't have it here, but I think everything comes from vision. It's important. When you have a vision for your organization, then everything ought to be aligned with that and nothing else. Everyone, I don't care if you're the president, the CEO, the founder, we are all supposed to submit to the vision. That is what is the overarching principle, driving force of any organization. Because if you don't stick to the vision, you're going to have other visions running your organization. You're going to have trends and what's hot, what's next, what other companies are doing. Oh, we're watching what they're doing over there, so we need to implement it here. No. When you have a vision for your organization, it gives you the boundaries, it gives you the focus, it gives you the direction for where you want your organization to go. And yes, while we look at competition and what they're doing, at the end of the day, whatever we do ought to be aligned with who we are, vision and purpose. Those things, and actually your vision should come from your purpose, your mission. This is what we exist to do. And everything else must fall in line with that. So the next pillar that I want to look at is values. What is important to the organization? And so again, we as an organization, we have to look at what is important to us collectively and decide. Again, this cannot be a personal decision. This can't be, and let me backtrack a little bit on that, because sometimes it comes from the founder or founders or partners, right? And so, yeah, it may come from a particular person, but the values should serve the needs of the entire organization, the greater good. And usually that does come from what people think are important. So Nicola is asking this question: how do we correct this behavior now? This is a tough one, Nicola, because you really need the buy-in. You need the buy-in from your top tier leadership. And sad to say, a lot of people in top tier leadership are oblivious to what is really going on in their organizations. They are so caught up in what they're focusing on. And a lot of times they're caught up in just talking to only certain people in the organization. So they're not going to get a full view of what's really going on. And so I am a strong advocate for senior leaders to talk to other people in their organization from all levels of the organization. You would be surprised at the depth and at the perspective of many people in the organization that are not in leadership. people who are in leadership but not senior leaders or not executives, but they have something very important to contribute. I had what I called a divine encounter yesterday at the gas station. I had such a profound conversation with the pump attendant that it blew my mind to the point where I had to put it in my calendar. I said, I have to mark this day. I have to mark this conversation because it spoke to me. And so I couldn't look at it as, oh, this is a pump attendant. He's pumping the gas into my car. He doesn't have anything of value to offer. And as leaders, we have to be so perceptive and so in tune and intuitive when we are moving and operating within our organizations. But that ties to values. Is listening to people important to you? Is seeing people important to you? I did a post a few weeks ago that leaders see people. You have to see people, but that has to be important to you. If people are not important to you, then you're not going to do it. So to go back to your question, Nicola, we have to look at ways that we can get their attention, right? So again, as leaders, emerging leaders, up and coming leaders, leaders with passion and purpose, we have to speak their language and put the message in ways that they understand and that they relate to. So for most leaders, I can tell you that numbers are important to them. So numbers, results, impact. How much is this going to cost? How does this impact the organization, either in results, productivity, outputs, or reputation? Some leaders are very concerned about what gets out about their organization. What are they saying about us, right? That brand reputation management. So sometimes that's the language, the way that we have to craft the messaging so that they understand it and can appreciate it. And so what does that mean? It means then that as the practitioners, as the technical officers, so to speak, in the organization, we need to rely more heavily on data, getting actual numbers that reflect what's going on. So this is why a lot of organizations implement surveying, particularly staff. I'm coming from an HR perspective, right? So if it's a staff issue, that you have employee satisfaction surveys, you have well-being surveys, you have engagement surveys, you have now everything is return to work, so you can do things around that, where we call it putting our finger on the pulse, right? Pulse surveys. We want to see what people are thinking, what people are feeling, what we may need to address, what are the current issues that are going on, right? There are other things from an HR perspective that you can measure, right? They call them HR metrics. And then every other area that you have your own metrics. So if you are more in a production field, you can look at, levels of waste, levels of accidents, levels of loss, high sales versus low sales. So like whatever you can get numbers on, and then find the contributing factors to those numbers. Because again, you have to find root causes. Root causes. That's where I think we fall down as well. Because many times we're looking at symptoms, but we're not looking at what is causing the symptoms. I'll never forget an experience that I had, and this actually has nothing to do with leadership, but it does, right? So I remember I had maybe a really bad flu or something several years ago, and I never forgot going into a pharmacy, and the pharmacist told me, as she saw me browsing and I was looking, I think, at cough medicines and things like that. And she came over to me and she said, it's much better for you to just Eat oranges, drink lots of fluid, get rest, and let it flush out of your system. Because a lot of these medications actually only suppress the symptoms that you're experiencing. And when I thought about it, I was like, you know what? She's right. When we are looking for a cough suppressant, we are actually restricting our body from doing naturally what it has to do to expel what is not supposed to be there. So we cough to get all of that gunk out of our lungs. That's what the body does to heal itself. So when we are in our organizations, we have to look at not just people resigning, absenteeism, lateness, bad attitudes, poor service, all of these sorts of things. We have to dig deeper into what is really going on. And I would share this with all managers. It's a symptom. So you can come and you can complain about this employee and say, this person is not performing. This person isn't showing up. This person isn't themselves. What is the root cause? Because the lateness, the drop in performance is only a symptom of what is happening. Tane is saying leaders have to remember that employees are the ones interacting with clients. They have firsthand insight based on clients' feedback and their position. Absolutely right. They're on the ground. They're hearing what people are saying. And that's why the employees and actually like that supervisory level, that frontline leadership, they are some core people that you need to pull in and really get a take on what they are seeing and experiencing, because they're the ones using your technology. They're the ones interfacing with your clients. They are the ones who now can say, well, you know what? This system is slow. This process is disruptive, or it's not working, or there are too many steps in the chain to get approvals, because at the end of the day, the customers are complaining they have to wait too long for this, that, or the other. It's very important. Hey, Angelo, good to see you here. And Angelo is saying, I think it's important to create a forum for line level associates to sit and speak to higher level leaders like the head of the company to hear what they have to say. It should not stop there. Once heard, the leaders will need to action. Absolutely. And I think one of the things that discourages people from sharing is that there's no action. That's discouraging. Like, I'm participating in these surveys, I'm telling you what I think, but then what I think doesn't matter. So it's almost as if you're getting my input because you're checking off a box for yourself. And, you could say to your other CEO friends that, hey, yeah, we do employee engagement surveys, but are you actually using the data to create change in your organization? Remember, where there are great leaders, there is evolution and revolution. Absolutely right. So we have to look at what's important to us. What is important to us will determine and dictate what we do in our organizations. So do you want your organizations to be one based on merit, one based on reward, one based on, work hard, play hard, we socialize, we do, we reward people, we recognize people, we are innovative, we make space for people to create and to submit ideas. It's okay to make mistakes. Like, what is important in the organization? Nicole is agreeing with you, Angelo. Agreed. Leaders need to ensure that trust is there and they act on employees' concerns. Surveys, meetings don't matter if employees feel they can't be honest due to fear of reprimand, victimization, or no action. Listen, that's an amen right there. And that's the truth. And leaders wonder why people don't speak up in meetings. And they're like, oh, we need to encourage them to speak up. We need to encourage, we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you. Like, really? Because the last time, or the last person that spoke up We saw what happened to them. Sometimes they're not even in the company anymore. Sometimes people get branded and they get stuck in a corner, so they're never eligible for promotions or opportunities anymore because they speak up. People see that. People watch that. And they're like, you know what? Everybody then gets in survival, self-preservation mode. And they're like, you know what? I'm not going to be a contributor in this organization. I'm going to do what is required of me. And that is it. I'm going to stay out of trouble. I'm going to stay under the radar. I have a friend who says, you know what? I just go like poke my head out of the door. And if the war is still raging, I'm going to go back under my desk. I'm paraphrasing, but that's kind of like what he says, right? He's like, I ain't coming out there to get in any trouble. So the next pillar of organizational culture is communication and communication styles. And this can sometimes really make or break an organization, how we communicate. How do we get information across to the organization? And do we? And I know since the pandemic particularly, and for many other companies even prior to the pandemic, are very email centric. And that's a part of the culture. Very email centric. So everything goes out by email. But I think for us to have effective communication in our organizations, we have to have multiple channels of communication. So we mentioned that with emails, with meetings, with maybe newsletters, with posters, all sorts of different avenues, other forums that are created, meet and greets, socials, all of those things that can create different ways and settings that people can communicate in and get the information. Repetition still works. They did it with us in primary school so that we could learn our alphabet and learn certain things we say by rote, but there is value in repetition, because I can guarantee you, you can send out an email today and everybody is going to interpret it a different way. Some people aren't going to see it. Some people will read it, forget about it. And so the more ways that you can send that information out, the better. How we communicate as leaders with people. Do we listen? Do we snap at people? Do we minimize people? Do we shame people? All of those things are communication styles. And how we treat mistakes. If people make a mistake or people are not doing well, not functioning well, how do we talk to them? How do we approach issues? Right? Do we put our heads under the sand? Do we have an ostrich style of communication and we just hope that it will take care of itself or somebody else will deal with it? We have to look at those styles because it impacts the entire organization. Next, the part of organizational culture that we ought to look at are work patterns, how we work. See, when we look at culture is, when we look at it from a national perspective, it's a way of life. And so this is the way of life at work. How do we work? What is our approach? Do we plan? Do we have goals? Do we have targets? Do we have deliverables? Are we held accountable? Do we work until it's done? We don't care about all the hours that have to be put in. I have worked for some companies like that. They don't care how long it takes, especially for managers. You put in 12, 14-hour days because you work until you get it done. That's a culture that's created. Or is the culture that you respect work-life balance? You respect people's personal time. You respect people's time. You respect people's, the way they process information and how they have to think and function and create. Do we respect that? So I know several years ago when we had these new and emerging companies coming forward and creating a completely different work culture where you could bring your pets to work, or you have massages at work, and you have, restaurants, and you can dress however you want, all of these things with a view to, if people are comfortable, then they should be able to produce. It'd be interesting to know if that culture and style is effective, right? How you approach work is a pillar of organizational culture, and one that should be very strategic. What is the type of work style that we want to have? And finally, for today, I want to talk about leadership styles. And I started off this show today talking about that quote, how leaders set the tone that the organization sings to. So your leadership style will dictate the way of life of the organization. So you have organizations that are very hierarchical, right? It's very much set on protocol and following the chain and making sure you're communicating the right way and all of that stuff. You may have some styles that are more, democratic, more open, more transparent, vulnerable, supportive, collaborative. I want to hear your ideas. I want to hear what you think. And I'm actually going to listen and apply it. That's a style that impacts culture. And so that's why in organizations, you will have pockets of positivity. Right? So you would have in certain departments, you would have in certain divisions, you would have in public administration, certain government agencies and ministries that seem to be run differently from the larger body. More often than not, I guarantee you, I challenge you to come back and tell me if this is wrong. But it would be based on the tone of the leadership. And if the leader says they're interested in they want customer service to be on point, if they want people to be responsive, answering emails, answering phone calls, how they handle people, how they are organized and structured and holding people accountable, you will see the difference in that department, division, agency, ministry, whatever that is. You'll see the difference in style. You'll see the difference with people who have more laissez-faire leaders, leaders who aren't really focused and they just let people do whatever they want to do, and you'll find that people are like, I need some direction. I need some structure here. As human beings, we need that. I need some organization. I need to know where we're going. What's the strategy? What are we working toward? And then you have some leaders who are just so autocratic. Is my way or the highway, and they micromanage the life right out of the organization. No one can think. No one can make a move. My God, it's crazy. So your leadership style will certainly dictate how the organizational culture will flow. Shelley's making a great point here. Nowadays, many managers and leaders are shocked that millennials and those of Gen Z are not fearful and deferring to authority. They say what they think and need in order to be productive and expect action, or they will leave. So a lot of current leaders have to rethink their established ways of leading, and that's the truth. And it started actually with Generation X. Generation X really is the forerunner in this mentality. I think the only thing that differs with, and you will see that it gets progressively pronounced with the newer generations. But Generation X is that age bracket where they're like, you know what? No, I'm not going to stay here for 30 years. I'm not going to do what my parents did. I'm going to take the risk and leave. So the Gen X may stay 5 years. They may stay 10 years. But you have a millennial that may say 2, right? So you can see that it's more pronounced, right? And so we do have to evolve. We do have to adjust. Now, yes, every generation they have pros and cons. No one is perfect. But I think that leaders cannot be afraid of people speaking their mind. That to me is a fundamental right of any human being. Why are we punished for speaking up? That to me speaks volumes about values, first of all, about leadership style, right? Andrea, how you doing? Said Gen Z is fearless. And you're right, they will tell you the heck off. And right, I guess they do have a little bit more freedom, right? Those of us that have some more financial responsibility, like the same friend that I was talking about, he says, if I didn't have these addictions, to food and internet and cable, then I would have been out of here. But I gotta eat. But other people, I'm not gonna stick this out. I am not going to stick this out. I can't deal with this. And we're seeing it more and more. People who don't even have a plan B, people who don't even have another option are leaving jobs because it is too unbearable. The work culture. Oftentimes people enjoy what they do. They enjoy their work. They love what they do. But it is what I have to work, the conditions that I have to work in, the processes that I have to go through, the hoops that I have to jump through, the minefield of toxicity that I have to navigate. It's too much. It's too much. And so it begins to now affect our mental health. It affects our physical health. It affects our emotional well-being. It affects our psyche. It affects our self-esteem. We begin to feel like we do not have value, that we can't contribute. People will tell you that you're talented and you don't believe it anymore because of these environments that you are conditioned in. And people don't realize it's a conditioning. Why? Because it's repeatedly happening over time. We spend 8+ hours in these environments 5 days, 6 days a week. And sometimes some of us don't shut off. So we still work on our days off. We still work in evenings. So it's a constant. Some of us are home, can't sleep, can't think because we're worried about what we left behind, what we didn't get to complete. All of that is a work culture. Leadership styles and values. That's how I got so addicted to my cell phone. I work for an organization where the expectation is that you have to be responsive. It doesn't matter that you're on your own time. It doesn't matter that you're on vacation. If you are sent an email, we need a response. That was a work culture that conditioned me a certain way. And then you have to, as they say in learning and development, you have to learn, unlearn, and relearn. So a lot of things we have to unlearn. Some things we got to learn. Donne, this is a perfect point. Some leaders don't have direction because they get pushed to the top. Oh, Lord. Trouble in the camp. Trouble in the camp right there. That is the truth. And this is why I do this show. Because we have to change that narrative. People need to be prepared, equipped, and qualified to be in these positions. And I'm not just talking about having degrees. And sometimes years of experience doesn't even count, because what were you doing in those experiences? Sometimes we have line level experiences repeated for 30 years. Are you able to function at certain levels? And you have to, as a leader, be open to continually grow and learn. And so again, Nicola, so this is exactly a point that I'm making with you, right? So when you see growth being stifled and high employee turnover, turnover is a symptom. And we need to get to the root cause. Why are people leaving? Lady Angelica is saying it. This is why millions left and millions continue to leave corporate, because you just can't take it. Just cannot take it. Thank you. Hi, Dino. Yes, you are able to. This will be on my profile, so you can always come back later and see it. Hi, Miss Karen. Some leaders are not able to empower others because of their own limits. You can't take me where you haven't been. Hello. And we see this. Oh my goodness. Anika was saying it's church today. It's the truth. I am so feeling this because I see it so often. And if you, as a leader, have not dealt with yourself, if you are broken, if you have not dealt with your limiting beliefs, your limitations, your fears and insecurities, your team and your organization is going to feel it. That's why you can't trust. That's why you micromanage. That's why you have to get information. That's why you got to watch people. Because it's coming from you. It's coming from your beliefs. Yes, some people will always try to play the system. Yes, but you put things in place to deal with that. You don't have to punish everybody to deal with a few people who aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Come on. So absolutely, there is a new paradigm about what leadership means and what leadership does and who leaders are represented to be. We have to change that mindset. Well, I'm glad that this show has been relevant and helpful to you. And there's no quick fix, unfortunately, Nicola. And sometimes, it has to be a will for change. And if there's not a will for change, and I've had to learn this the hard way, that you exhaust yourself trying to initiate and facilitate change that the organization does not want. And when you get to that crossroad, you have to sometimes make some very profound decisions for yourself. Because if that is not the path that they're on, you have to determine, do I want to continue on that path with them? Or do I want to find another path that I am more aligned with? So it really boils down to that personal decision, you know? Absolutely right. Leaders must be able to listen and learn. We have to move away from this positional leadership where we feel it's all about my position. It's all about the power that I have, and I could throw my weight around, and you're just supposed to do as I say, not as I do, and be subservient and be my groupies, and it's narcissistic. We're not to be in these organizations to worship the leadership. That's not why we're there. We are there to execute the purpose and vision of the organization. That's why we're all there, leadership included. Oh, Lord. I have to run after this one, Anika, because this is some serious stuff. This is hard truth that we need to face, honestly. And unless we face it, we are not going to change it. I had a vocal and piano coach that one of his mantras was awareness and adjustment. Awareness and adjustment. And he's like, if you are aware of what you need to change, then you will change it, or you should change it. So a lot of times we're not aware. But once you have the awareness, then you need to have the will, the desire, and the follow through on the change. And as we close, this is so true. People create and foster culture. People create, nurture, live, reinforce the culture. So when people leave organizations, they are truly leaving people that have impacted the organization. Yep. They tell you, yep, you become the dissenter, you're the detractor, you are, you're not on board. You're not on the same page with us. And you know what? Sometimes you have to just leave them to themselves, because they have the organization exactly how they want it and where they want it. And unfortunately, because we're in an environment where, there's such a wide pool of people who have lost jobs and all of that, people think that talent is indispensable, but it's not. Because you want people who have that organizational fit. You want people who have the intellectual capital of the organization. They understand it. They know the flow. They know what you need. They bring innovation to it. They have loyalty. People complain because they care. People want to see change because they care. They can see the solutions right there in front of them, and it's not changing. And so that's when people get frustrated, and that's when people speak up. But if we pay attention, as Karen said, if you're listening, if you're learning from all levels of the organization, then you will hear that this is a recurring theme. This is a trend. This is a pattern. So the same way that we would watch marketing trends and sales trends and what the ebb and flow of our money, we need to pay the same attention to our culture and what's happening internally, because otherwise we could just implode. It's really important that we do this. So I'm so excited, as you could tell, with this series. And this was just to lay the foundation of what organizational culture is and the leader's role in it. And next time we want to talk about how, as leaders, we can identify those powerful elements of culture that we can transform in our organizations. Absolutely. Leaders must ask questions. Questioning is a powerful tool because it shifts our position from being the fount of all knowledge and the person with all the answers. You may even know the answer, but sometimes by asking a question, you get a different perspective that you didn't even have yourself, right? So that's a very powerful tool, and it's actually a coaching tool. Asking questions is a coaching technique that really, really works. Yes, and this is the great resignation that we're talking about. A mass exodus. But and it goes back to values. If they don't think that people are important and why people leave is an important information to know, then they're not going to care. They just think these people are replaceable. Let's just go out and recruit some more people. And we bring them into this toxic environment and the cycle continues. They will leave. They're not going to last. And we have to wake up and smell the coffee. Have to. If we're going to be successful and if we're going to last the test of time. Companies are folding up. We can't think that we're going to exist forever. We have to pay attention to all of these elements of organizational success. Tell me about it, Shelley. HR, child. Sometimes they put HR in the corner. You just sit over there and push paper and keep quiet. That's a topic for another day. Because if we want to do HR right, a lot of these problems we would not be having in our organizations. But I'll just drop the mic right there. We'll leave that one for another time. But have an amazing rest of your day whenever you're watching this. If you're watching the replay, thanks again for stopping by. And maybe you want to come back and take some notes on the points and see how can I apply this to my organization, to what I'm dealing with at work right now. And you know what? Nicola, I want to encourage you and other people that may be dealing with the same thing. Sometimes taking on the organization may be too big of a task. Sometimes just focus on your sphere of influence first. What do you have control over? How could you set the tone in your area, right? And in what you have control over. It gives you more peace of mind. It gives you more sense of control, where you're not trying to just take on this whole Goliath on your own. Sometimes you just can't do that. It's just not practical. It's not healthy. So focus on what you can change. Have the courage to change those things. And the rest of it, leave it. You may have to leave that for another person, your successor, leave it for another generation, another moment in time. That may not even be for this season in time. And so as leaders, we have to be as perceptive and intuitive in that regard to know what battles we need to fight and what battles we need to leave or have someone else fight. Have a great weekend. Have a fearless Friday. If you're there already, listen, do you, and most importantly, live limitless. Until the next time, I'm Simmone L. Bowe. Take care. Love all of you. Thank you so much yes, that's the Serenity Prayer, for tuning in and being a part of the show. Level Up Live for Limitless Leaders.